Let's put it on the table here. Mr. Trump is big on optics. He likes to be seen as a tough guy. He left this meeting as the much weaker guy.
Hello and welcome to Frontline for Times Radio. I'm Louis Sykes. Today we're talking to Michael Bociurkiw, a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. He's also an author and journalist and runs the Substack World Briefing. Well, Michael, thank you very much for joining us today.
Good to be with you. Thank you for having me again.
So, no deal until there's a deal is the line out of the meeting in Alaska. What did you make of the Trump-Putin meeting yesterday evening?
Well, talk about vague. If that's the way someone breaks up with somebody, they probably wouldn't know they're being broken up with. But, the main thing that struck me after a few hours sleep when I woke up and thought about everything, I watched everything very carefully, obviously, was, from beginning to end, this seemed to have been something that could have been scripted entirely by the Kremlin. Even the way the two leaders wrote together, the way they refused to take questions from the media at that media scrum at the beginning, and then at the end in the so-called press conference, absolutely mind-blowing that, Mr. Putin is on U.S. soil as a guest. He's the one essentially running the press conference, speaking first, rambling on at length, and then Mr. Trump goes on, and then they don't take any questions from the media. And but why should we be surprised? Hours before leaving for Alaska, Mr. Trump held a press conference in the Oval Office, where once again, as he has many times, referred to us, the media, as fake news. He referred to CNN again as fake news, and he's very busy decapitating the institutions of government at home, especially the ones that Russia doesn't like. For example, Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, institutions that keep a close check on what Russia is doing in Ukraine. So, he went into a scenario with Mr. Putin where a bromance of sorts could flower even more. But, the other thing, I knew, I think, within the few seconds of that media event, let's call it, at the end, that there wasn't much movement, especially when Mr. Putin started talking about bilateral relationships and then went on to the issue of Ukraine. But when he did get to Ukraine, he did say all root causes of the conflict must be eliminated. So, of course, as you and I well know by now, that is code for, Ukraine is a illegitimate nation. Zelensky is illegitimate. Russian speakers have to be protected. Ukraine has to demilitarize, all those long list of things that need to be done. And then the other thing, which was extremely bizarre, who is the last world leader to reportedly whisper into Mr. Trump's ear before landing in Alaska? Alexander Lukashenko of Belarus, the dictator for life, who's imprisoned thousands of opponents, and who, not that we need to remind anybody, but, before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, he hosted Russian troops to invade from the north, and he continues to host them. He apparently is going to be hosting some of Russia's nuclear arsenal. It would be really, really interesting to see what the two really discussed, other than the release of prisoners. So finally, for Ukraine, I guess the good news, if any, is no solid deal appears to have been made. They didn't really talk about a temporary ceasefire, which of course could be bad in the short term, but there is still a chance that Ukraine and Europe could influence the course of events over the next weeks.
And you're in Italy at the moment, I understand, Michael, but usually you'd be based in Ukraine. What's the reaction been from your fellow countrymen, other Ukrainians, to the visuals of this meeting?
Well, it didn't take long for them to react. I was carefully monitoring Ukrainian language Telegram channels and Ukrainian social media. And not only in Ukraine, but among the millions of members of the diaspora, total disgust, nauseating reactions to that photo of Mr. Trump applauding Mr. Putin as he approached him, but also the two riding together in the beast. Not only is that a break of protocol, that rarely happens. The fly past, all of those things put together was something that people thought is rewarding Mr. Putin, rewarding a wanted war criminal for his actions in Ukraine. One of the Democratic senators from Connecticut said today, all this does, this kind of imagery and photo ops, is send a signal to other autocrats around the world that they can do what they want basically, and they can still get rewarded for it. So absolutely mind-boggling. Now let's put it on the table here. Mr. Trump is big on optics. He likes to be seen as a tough guy. He left this meeting as the much weaker guy.
And aside from that hero, sort of almost hero's welcome,
Yeah.
Putin doesn't seem to really have achieved much, though, does he? I mean, it's worth remembering there were fears going into this meeting. Trump was talking about land swaps. There was an idea that Europe simply wasn't going to get any say on what the outcome of any agreement might be. Is there some reason for a sense of relief in Europe, at least, out of this meeting?
Well, I thought so, but then I was just on a Turkish broadcaster, and they told me that Mr. Trump has brought up the issue of land swaps again. And this, I tell you, raises a lot of ears in Ukraine, because they know exactly what that means. That means that Mr. Putin would presumably be allowed to retain what he has, but also take over the remainder of Zaporizhia and Kherson Oblast. That is a no-go for the Ukrainians. And it is very, very worrisome what could happen in the next little while, because, some people might say, well, it doesn't matter what Mr. Trump or the U.S. thinks. Well, it does matter for the time being, because the United States does provide so much to Ukraine to defend itself, including those Patriot missile systems, the intelligence sharing. And even though he's not in Mr. Trump's good books, Mr. Musk does provide the Ukrainian military with that very, very crucial Starlink communication system.
And one small climb down we saw from Putin was this admission that Ukraine would need some sort of security support or security guarantees after any ceasefire or end to this conflict. I mean, that's presumably valued by Ukraine as much as Russia's previous guarantees of security are. But is that language encouraging out of this meeting in any way?
I'm not so sure. I think what was more worrisome to the Ukrainians when Mr. Trump said, now it's up to Mr. Zelensky to get the deal done. So why should the U.S. continue to be involved? Let another interlocutor that's trusted by all sides, like Turkey, take that position over. And I'm sure many Ukrainians don't believe a word that comes out of Mr. Putin's mouth. He has lied repeatedly from from way before the time they shot down MH17 to even temporary agreements regarding red lines or temporary ceasefires during the current war. So Ukrainians have become very smart over the centuries when it comes to Russian intentions. But for sure, they do realize that, they're not going to make the same mistake again as they did with the Budapest Memorandum when they gave up their nuclear arsenal in return for international protection. They are not going to sign on a dotted line unless there are very, very solid security guarantees. And that needs to be put to the Russians that if any agreement is made, if you violate any of them, the consequences will be very immediate and very, very painful.
And as that issue of security guarantees did come up, is there room here, do you think? Is it time for Europe or that coalition of the willing to kind of try and seize on that and put more pressure on the idea of EU and UK boots in Ukraine, do you think?
Well, I'd like to think so. But as I believe it was, the defense minister was live on another broadcaster the other day and asked point blankly, can you mobilize, a fleet of aircraft to take part in some attack? And he wouldn't answer it. And I don't think they can. The Navy is not in very good shape either. And, if you look at here in Italy or in the United Kingdom or in France, I mean, leaders are dealing with very, very serious issues right now. Migration being top of the list, but also cost of living issues, things like that. And there isn't the kind of fiscal room in any of the budgets to take a huge chunk of money and all of a sudden devote it to Ukraine. As I've probably told you before, is that had the leaders been smart and savvy, and 3 or 4 years ago, when they saw what is going to be happening, went to the electorate and said, boys and girls, sorry, but we're going to have to go on a war footing, because if we don't, this Russia's aggression, whether it's Ukraine or whatever, is going to have very, very serious ramifications, not only just innocent foreigners or opponents of Mr. Putin being killed, for example, on UK soil, but disturbances in elections, but also cutting of undersea cables, of that hybrid warfare that is happening. And further aggression could trigger another massive flow of millions of people towards European countries. The consequences are absolutely huge. They did not do that because they're cowards, I think, and also Europe right now is very disunited, and I think it's actually going to get worse as right-wing parties get more ground. A total mess right now. That's why I think Mr. Zelensky feels in his head as the clock is ticking, and that's why he's spending so much time here on the European continent right now to try and sew up some kind of security guarantees and assistance.
And we mentioned before, Michael, the briefness of that sort of short press appearance. I don't think you could even really call it a conference. What did you make of Putin's reaction to the Western press? There was that moment where he seemed quite shocked when questions were shouted at him. It's quite telling, isn't it, that there were no questions asked to the two leaders after this conference.
Yeah, well, as I said, it looked like it was a Kremlin script. It almost feels like the White House agreed to whatever they asked for. The only complaints we heard were from the Kremlin media circus, who landed and had to stay on cots in the Alaska Airlines Stadium, and they were really disappointed with the food after they were feted with no less than chicken Kiev on the official government plane coming in. Typical Russian behavior of not being thankful. But yeah, it's. Look, I think Mr. Putin knew exactly what he was coming into. He was well prepared. He was almost playing up to the whole thing, and at one point shouting to another reporter or mocking him. But and I actually, having woken up this morning after watching everything, I actually feel sorry for the press corps and the media outlets putting all those resources to get to Alaska. And basically what they had access to were long distance views of the tarmac, of that bromance taking place there, and then briefly in front of the two leaders.
And we've also heard now, of course, that Zelensky is going to meet Trump on Monday. How can he guarantee that he's going to get more out of that meeting than Putin?
Well, I have a couple of things here. Number one is I think Mr. Zelensky has to be extremely careful not to walk into another trap as he did the first time in the Oval Office. And, if I were Mr. Zelensky, and I'm sure a lot of Ukrainians would agree with me, is when he arrives at the White House, if he actually gets there, to refuse to shake hands with Mr. Trump and say, I'm sorry, but you just shook hands with a war criminal wanted by the ICC. You just shook hands with a man with the blood of tens of thousands of Ukrainians on his hand. You just shook hands and welcomed a man onto US soil who has forcibly abducted thousands of Ukrainian children. The list goes on and on and on. The rap sheet is very long. So make a statement. I'm sure that would go over incredibly well, not only in Ukraine, but among the millions of members of the diaspora. We all remember when Biden went to Saudi Arabia and met MBS for the first time after the horrible murder of the journalist Khashoggi. They did a fist bump. So, these types of acts are very, very rich and valuable in symbolism. Having said that, let him have another go. But I have a sense that it may be a chance for Mr. Trump to say, okay, Zelensky, here's what Mr. Putin wants. Here's what you're going to do. And once again, he can tell himself, well, I have the backing of European leaders and so on. But again, they're not prepared, at the moment at least, to back him up. Extremely risky. If it doesn't go well in Washington, I don't expect it to. I mentioned Turkey earlier on in the show. Let Zelensky talk to his very good friends in Turkey, or maybe even one of the Gulf states, to take the place of Washington. Mr. Trump has so discredited himself by taking this huge, huge issue that has cost hundreds of thousands of lives and treating it as it's another mobster casino deal, agreeing to things, pennies on the dollar. That's not the way you handle foreign diplomacy. And should we even be surprised? He went into this with hardly any national security team in place. He's surrounded by incompetence. As they say in Ukrainian, "Маємо те, що маємо," we have what they have. Sorry, "Маємо те, що маємо," we have what we have. It's kind of a fatalistic idiom saying, well, this is the way things are, but we have to move on and we have to survive as a nation. We're in an existential fight.
And just to finish, Michael, I think one of the most crucial things coming out of this meeting is the question, has Putin managed to repair his and Russia's image with this meeting? Has he managed to force his way back onto the world stage and eschew that sense that Russia had become a pariah state?
Yes and no. I mean, it depends where Mr. Trump and his administration take this. I think Mr. Trump still has this fantasy in his head that Russia is a great economic power. And if only we could get access to their minerals and maybe get Russians back into the United States investing, even again, if it's pennies on the dollar, if only we could get access to those minerals lying in the ground in the Russian Arctic or in land seized by Russia. But let's remind everyone, too, that China is very much lurking in the background. I think I have a pretty strong feeling that China was coaching the Kremlin on what to do. They're very, very keen to get access to those resources, whether they're on illegally seized territory or not. And, I don't want to get too much into the geopolitics, but we are seeing, as the months roll on, a more coalescing of countries that feel wronged or sidelined by the United States, the members of the BRIC group of nations. Much, much more talk about de-dollarization, dealing in their own currencies. There's a heck of a lot of stake at here. But again, to give this type of welcome, red carpet, to a wanted war criminal with such a horrible, bloody rap sheet is absolutely disgusting. Beyond belief.
Well, Michael Bociurkiw, thank you very much for speaking with me today on Frontline.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You've been watching or listening to Frontline for Times Radio with me, Louis Sykes. For more on the war in Ukraine, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and sign up for a membership, or you can hear all the latest news and analysis on Times Radio or read it at thetimes.com. And remember, we are in both podcast and video form. You can find us on your favourite podcast platform. It's Times Radio's Frontline, or you can watch us on Times Radio's YouTube channel. Thanks very much. Goodbye.